So I've found that there are 6 stages to any transformation process within an individual, within a relationship, and even within a community or an entire system or an organization. And these are these stages, as I understand them. Stage 1, dissonance. Dissonance is when you take 2 outputs and they don't match each other in their energy, right? So dissonance is common throughout the universe. It's common. It happens all the time. It's whenever 2 things or more are not in harmony. They're not in synchronization. So in a relationship, dissonance, you can feel it. If you're aware in the relationship, you can feel it when it arrives and when it comes, and it's always uncomfortable, right? And many relationships, they just kind of go on in dissonance, and people are just reacting in the dissonance, and it doesn't get transformed. It just goes back into its loop and continues. And the same in communities, the same in governments, the same in countries. Dissonance is there to tell us something, but it's the beginning of a process, of a journey. And it's a very magical journey, actually. So dissonance is to be respected. It's to be perhaps welcomed in our hearts whenever we feel it. This also applies to you as an individual. You can have days where you just feel dissonant, where there's something in the stellar field, or there's something, out there, something in the weather patterns that's dissonant. That when you take, I don't know if you remember, like in physics lessons at school, if you had that experience where you work with a wave tank and you drop in 2 different things and you watch the waves coming together, and then you see them colliding and creating this interference frequency, and eventually those patterns begin to harmonize. And it's the same with us. So dissonance is a really important thing. It's really important as the baseline of all transformation, of all creative processes, of evolution itself. It begins with dissonance. The second stage is called feedback. And so you might know, like when you're, if you go to a gig or something, or you go to one of those, someone working with audio and, like mics and things, and then suddenly you get that very loud burst of feedback when someone's playing with the mic, and you get that kind of really loud grating sound. That's the feedback that's coming out of the dissonance. So feedback arrives out of dissonance. So the first stage is dissonance, and dissonance is very subtle, in a way, because we don't, unless you have real deep awareness and you're a deep meditator or something, and you really are aware, you often you're not aware of dissonance until there's feedback. Dissonance is deep inside us. And if you're busy about your life, you may not even notice it. You're used to it. So you're having a bad day, so you react to the bad day, and you're just plowing on with things. Unless you're pausing, you don't notice it. Right? So because pausing allows you to tune in and go, there's something deeply uncomfortable inside me today. I need to pay attention to it. Right? What usually happens, though, is that feedback occurs. And in any system and in any relationship, there's always feedback that comes out of dissonance. And the feedback can be positive and it can be negative. So feedback can be anger that erupts out of the dissonance. So that what's happening is the system is alerting itself that there's dissonance. The relationship is alerting itself that there's dissonance. And that can be a positive or a negative. It also depends, there's a way where you can look at even the negative can be turned to a positive. So a burst of anger or irritation, or, someone flipping out in a community, is a piece of feedback that's saying that there's some dissonance at the core. And that feedback is of incredible value. So even if that person or that behavior is very challenging, the feedback of it is very valuable. And it's saying, listen here. There is some dissonance. There is a process that's underway, and it's going to probably be uncomfortable, and we don't know the result, and we need to follow it and listen to it. The healthy feedback is when you can say, I feel dissonance, and you don't blame it. The feedback, what it usually becomes in the shadow state, in a negative state, is feedback then gets transferred as blame, or what psychologists call transference. So you transfer the blame of the feedback onto the other person instead of realizing it's actually just dissonance in the field. It's not about that person necessarily. It's something passing through the relationship, through the individual, through the body, through the community, the organization. And that doesn't mean that suddenly that person who's throwing it up is very, very important, or that they're right or anything. They're just an aspect of the dissonance of the whole. And it doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It may be that they have their own personal wound, and they probably do. And they need to be responsible for that. One needs to be responsible for one's feedback. So you can give positive feedback and you can say, this isn't working, I didn't like this, I felt this, and you own it inside yourself, but you offer feedback to the other. But it's feedback with respect, with courtesy. It's not through blame. That's healthy feedback. That's the second phase. So the third phase is kind of magical. It's called assimilation. And assimilation is when the alchemy starts to occur. So feedback is just suddenly you're aware of the pattern. Assimilation is when the pattern starts to transmute inside you because you're aware of it. And it's uncomfortable because you now are aware that there's a process going on and you don't know where it's going and you're not in control of it and you have to surrender to it. And that's a very magical phase because all transformation at some point reaches this stage. And if you've had healthy feedback, it really helps you move through the assimilation process more easily. Assimilation is it's almost like you can feel the darkness, but you can also see a glimpse of the light. So you're in purgatory in a sense. Something's changing inside you, something is changing inside the group, but it's not there yet. It hasn't become clear. It hasn't kind of come out yet, but you can feel a stirring. And it's really important to honor this. It's a chaos zone. And there are people who are very good in chaos zones. The people that are very grounded are able to sit within chaos. They're able to sit within conflict, to look at it, to accept it, to embrace it. And realize that it's not something you need to flip out over, right? Conflict can be very, very beneficial. It can be very creative if it's approached in that way. And assimilation will go on for some time. The body has to assimilate, the information of the transformation. And in a relationship, the body of each person and the body of the relationship and its chemistry will do the transformation. So if each individual in a relationship are able to maintain courtesy, then the transformation may well occur in a very healthy way and much more swiftly. Whereas if they're fighting and they're stuck in the feedback loop, then the assimilation doesn't really occur, not in a healthy way. So it's a phase that's really, really, really special and really important. The fourth phase is called sharing. So out of the assimilation then comes a kind of beam of light. And sharing is very different from feedback. Feedback is just the kind of first awareness of the dissonance, right? Sharing has gone through some assimilation. And you have to go through assimilation in order to be able to share clearly. And sharing is about authenticity. It's about sharing authentically how it makes you feel. So if we're looking at this on an individual level, sharing is really about you seeing for the first time what's happening in your life, what's occurring to you, and being able to share it with another person who you trust or love. To speak it, to share it, to dance it, to, some way to externalize it, so that you can see it or you draw it or the assimilation has to then come out of us, because assimilation is a very internal process. It's like in the cauldron, and then the sharing emerges. So something has to emerge. In a relationship, the sharing is really a critical phase, because you have to share again without apportioning blame. You have to share, this made me feel like this, or this makes me feel like this. I feel this. And what happens in the sharing phase often is a lot of emotion comes out, but it's not in the feedback kind of reactive stage. It's been processed. It's had some time. The relationship has had some time. The partners have had some time to reflect. And so they've been apart perhaps and come back together, and then they can share in an authentic way without being kind of codependent, if you know what I mean. So sharing, and in a group or in a community, the sharing is essential, that everyone gets listened to. Everyone that needs to be listened to is listened to. It's as simple as that. They just need to be listened to. There doesn't have to be answers. There just has to be the sharing and the place of sharing, so that the voices, the complaints, the criticisms, the hurt, the anger, the love, all of it can come out. And everyone has a different view. So all the sharing is of great value, and it needs to come out and be heard. That's sharing, the fourth stage. The fifth stage is called crystallization. Crystallization. Crystallization is when, or distillation is another word for it. Let's use distillation. Distillation is when out of the sharing, suddenly everyone comes inside themselves to this moment, this crystalline place of aha. Now I've gone through this process, I've assimilated, I've shared, I don't have anything left I need to kind of put out there. And in the natural process, then comes this kind of, I'm done. I think we're done. I think we've almost come to the end. Because then suddenly whatever it was that you needed to learn, you realize you've learned it. And if that's just you as an individual, on an individual basis, out of the process that you've been in, however long it's taken, and you've gone through all these stages, and you've shared and you've externalized it, and then suddenly it goes, aha, now I know what this experience has really been for. I've unlocked the purpose in the suffering, the higher purpose. That's wonderful. And in a relationship, it's very wonderful, because both partners then can look at each other and go, I own my part of this. I see what I contributed. I see the good and I see the bad, and the lesson is learned in the individual, but also the relationship itself can kind of distill the truth of what's just occurred, and then it becomes a stronger relationship because it's gone through a transformation. So there's a bonding that occurs through distillation. And in the sharing bit, there's all words and there's a lot of emotion stuff and soul coming out. In the distillation, it's not. In the distillation, it's really clear. It's really economical. You've gone past that emotional stage and you're into this quintessence stage. It's very, very, very powerful. In a community or an organization, because this is across whole systems, that distillation phase is quite often it's one person that manages to distill it, or one or two people, key people, who actually distill the truth of what's happened and can put it into words or express it, in a way that is really clear. Many people are silent in that phase because the distillation has occurred inside them and they've understood for themselves what the lesson is, and there's no longer any need to share all that because it's like anchored inside. I've learned, through this experience. But the whole also learns through the experience. So there's a distillation for everyone. And often the leader will distill, or the leaders in the community or the role models in the community will speak the distillation on behalf of the whole in a very elegant, often way. And the final phase of transformation is, the sixth phase, is called gratitude. And gratitude is the afterglow, because what you feel having distilled that lesson is you feel a release. You feel like I've gone from dissonance to gratitude. You know, and you're suddenly grateful for the dissonance, because you go, wow, what a journey, you know? And you feel this, oh, I'm done. This little phase, this little Leela, this little play, this little theatre, whatever it's been, or however big it was, you know, whatever crisis that we went through or that I went through, I now understand it. I've let go of it. I've moved on. I'm a stronger person, you know, and I feel grateful for the whole process, the whole journey. And you can look back on it and really feel that. In a relationship, the same. What often happens is that love blossoms at that point, appreciation blossoms, respect blossoms between the pair, you know, because they look at each other and they go, you can really feel the love come back, having gone through this phase of no love and confusion and chaos and then assimilation and all of that and the anger and whatever it is that came out. But you stayed the course, and the gratitude that you will feel for staying the course is extraordinary. And you can be deeply grateful, and then your heart starts to kind of beat again, and you can look at the other person in the eyes and you can go, I'm so grateful that you did this, or you said that, or you stayed with me, and or you know, and there's an appreciation, because the transformation has run its course. And in a community, this is beautiful, because it's a mutual appreciation that occurs. The sense of gratitude is actually felt throughout the community, you know, at some level. It flows throughout the collective community, both, you know, because you've distilled something, the community's distilled something as a whole, but also all those individuals have distilled individual things for themselves. So there's a rush of gratitude at the end, you know, where people are able to feel this kind of uplift within the organization, and this health, this glow, this radiance, as the community reaches a level of coherence that before was not there. And all systems, individuals, relationships go through these phases, beginning with dissonance, a little spark of dissonance, and then it grows, and then the feedback comes, and then it's assimilated through that process of alchemy, and then there needs to be this sharing of authentic voices, and then there's this distillation, and finally there's the gratitude that comes. And it's really important when you're in one of these processes, which we all are most of the time, it's really important just to realize that there's a beginning and a middle and an end. And you don't even have to know exactly where you are, although it's usually pretty clear which phase you're in, and that can be very encouraging to know and to identify which phase you're in, because it gives you the sort of commitment to follow the process and the journey through to the end, and not to kind of go off down a path and try and escape from it, because then you miss the gift of the transformation. You never get to the gratitude or the distillation. So those are the phases of the journey of transformation as I understand it. I hope it's useful, and I hope that you can, whether you're an individual, whether you're applying it as a relationship, or you're applying it wider into a community or an organization, you can begin to see, you know, the wonder of this universal process that applies to all life forms and whole systems and everything. The very cosmos operates according to these stages. You know, so an entire lifetime is those 6 stages. A small experience within a day is those stages. You know, you'll see it everywhere, a fundamental universal pattern woven into the very fabric of the evolutionary impulse. So, hope you enjoy contemplating it and find it of value.